that's we here talk a lot about how video games are a form of art, right? And for me, that's really clear. But there's some people that don't get it, right? Because I think obviously in video game design you have to draw stuff, you have to animate stuff, and that is obviously art, okay? But in my perspective, the people who made the codes are the artists as well, you know. And you explaining how this creative process goes shows to us that it is a form of art.
yeah,
And
sure.
I always say, I repeat this all the time, that a game should be what the developers want it to be, whether you like it or not. Because there's the only way that you can do the best game you can if you do what you really feel like doing, right? And I want to ask something, curiosity, because and that's cool for people that are watching, because you talked about the feedback of the after you launch Witcher 2 or any game, and then you see the feedback. How important it is to you? Because there are people, not most, but there are people that say that complaining doesn't work, talking about the game doesn't change anything, and stuff like that. And and I want to and you talked about it right now. How do you feel and improve with the feedback after the game launches?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Honestly, like, I mean, if you look at Cyberpunk, right, like the path that this game went through, right, like since the release till patch 2.0 at the end, and then Phantom Liberty. I mean, you know, like the main thing that we've been addressing was the criticism from people, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, sure, I mean, we had a plentiful of our own ideas, you know, what we want to do, what we want to build. Of course, you always have, right? You always have. And to be frank, like, again, because we are designers, right? Because we are game developers, we spend every waking hour talking about this, thinking about this. So as a developer like this, you are just, I would say, maybe better prepared to be, you know, to design and to point out what something's wrong. Like, I always like to look at the players' feedback in a way that when they point out that something doesn't, that they don't like something and they would like it changed, I often don't look on how they would like to change it, but rather what they would like to change. Because most people, and I'm not talking about journalists and YouTubers, influencers, because those people are much more educated, I would say, and trained. But I'm talking about players right now, right? Players, in most cases, they can quite well say what I don't like. I don't like that. I don't like that. But they often won't be able to tell you exactly how to fix it. That is that takes much more knowledge and information to really be able to do that. So I always look first and like what players say what they don't like. You're like, what is the issue? Great example, I think it's the one that always makes me laugh, is the clown fiesta in Cyberpunk 2077, you know, in the clown meta, as we called it, because of the clothing, because of the fact that clothing had armor assigned to it, then suddenly you run around with, like, you know, pink boots and like a bra and high heels and a cowboy hat, because that has the biggest armor, right? And that simple decision to tie up the armor with the clothing led to creation of the clown meta, basically, that everyone looked like just ridiculous, right? Yeah. And people kept saying that they just don't want to look like that. They want to wear what they want to wear. And yes, for me, that's like an actual problem. But then solutions that players were bringing up were really varied. Some of them were really on point, but some of them were super varied, right? So I really like to listen to, like, complaint first, like, what is the problem? Like, what is the issue? And then, you know, of course, look, because sometimes people actually have very good ideas for solutions, but then be, like, really analytical and try to understand, okay, what would be the fix or the change or the improvement that actually really addresses this the most. And that's how we do it. You know, that's why I like looking at Cyberpunk from that perspective, because I think it's very hard to defend, I would say, the opinion that developers don't look at players' players' feedback in case of Cyberpunk, right? Because, like, I would say probably 80%, maybe more, was literally coming from players' feedback. Yeah. Sure, there were some things that we did just because we wanted to, because, like, we thought it's cool, because it matches the game well, and so on. But a lot of it was just, you know, player feedback, like, directly.
Yeah.
And going back to Witcher 3, it was the same thing. To smaller extent, but the same thing, right? Like, players were, for instance, pointing out that the combat system in, like, base Witcher was a bit shallow, that there was not enough variety and not enough depth. So that's why we introduced, for instance, the rune words, right? That you have in the Hearts of Stone, right? That you can like carve them on your weapons and stuff. So that was like an attempt for us to introduce more depth to this. You know, the mutations, I think they went in Blood and Wine, that we introduced in Witcher 3. Again, trying to address the same criticism, you know, the same problem that people were bringing up. So there was always a way for us when we looked into that feedback and we tried to improve it. Now, there are, of course, situations when it's really, really hard to improve some things, you know, because something is, let's say, in a core of or in a spine of your game, and then like, you know, reworking it or redoing it is like maybe pretty much like a remake of a whole game. And sometimes it's really, really hard, you know, like the Cyberpunk 2.0 update and the you know, complete rework of the skills. That was exactly the example. Like, it was just so much work. And I mean, guys, like during the development, it broke so much in the game, right? You can imagine like suddenly you just replace something that is a very core of character progression in your game. Obviously, it's going to break stuff, right? But we really wanted to do it because we felt that it wasn't working properly before. And we went ahead with that. Another example is the police system, right? Like, police system is such a major change in 77. And again, that's a story I never told publicly, so I think we maybe a cool thing to talk about. Like, we have quests in Cyberpunk where police or MaxStack are actually like taking parts in the quest, right?
Yeah.
But when suddenly all the units of police and MaxStack are a part of the system that you introduced, then that system gets activated in moments when it shouldn't, right? Because suddenly, let's say you had, for instance, in Cyberpunk, there was the story about, you know, the suicide story about the guy in the mega building. You know, I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's 2 police officers there, right? The fact that they were just normal NPCs before, and now you suddenly have a police system that comes in. Suddenly, you have to take into account that police system detects that there are units spawned, and they start using their senses. They start seeing you and acting out like the system tells them to do. And suddenly it breaks the scene. Suddenly they start doing things. Even further, the quest Bullets that I did, the one with Melissa Rory. So she's the woman from 2012 trailer, the announcement trailer with the archive music playing, right? So that quest has the MaxStack in, right? But MaxStack is the 5th level of our police system now, right? MaxStack arrives, they drop in from the AVs, attack you. Suddenly, you have the MaxStack arriving as a part of the story, but it has to work with the system. In the patch 2.0 that we've introduced I reworked that quest completely. So like, for you as a player, it looks like the same quest. Inside, I have changed completely the scripting, all the entities, so like the units that are used there. I had to handle so many things, and I hid a couple things there. I think players already discovered what you can do there, because I hid a couple cool things there because I could now, because I was reworking it. But for patch 2.0, I had to go in and rescript that whole thing again, because that whole system was changed. Anyway, just an example, because like it's a change in the very core of your game, of your content. It's a lot of work. It's just a lot of work, you know? So like sometimes you just wonder, okay, is it really worth it? Like, should I go through this? Should we put this time into this, you know? But of course, you know, in case of Cyberpunk, we really, really, really want to make it right, you know?